Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Orphan's Tales Live Quarantine Reading Series. We'll give everyone a little extra time to sign on tonight because Twitter has kicked off all the blue checks, and I happen to be a blue check. So I couldn't tell you all about the reading. I had to go through Heath because retweets are all that's allowed. If you don't know, it's because everybody got hacked. Not me, but all the political people got hacked to try and get you to send them Bitcoin or something. So their genius move was to just shut down everybody who had a verified checkmark, which includes me. So I'm off Twitter for the evening. Thank you for those of you who have managed to figure out that this was still happening tonight. I expect we'll have a slightly smaller crowd than usual, but hopefully people will trickle in. Life's funny under quarantine, I guess. So yeah, I hope everyone's doing all right. It's a little cooler tonight, so I'm not quite as roasting as I usually am. The lipstick tonight, I did dig up a new lipstick for you guys. I know everyone enjoys that, so I found one. I was like, ooh, I haven't worn that one. This is a Bite lipsticks, and it is mulled maple. It's definitely a good one. It's super dark and gets on everything, though, so fair warning if you go to buy it. Yeah, well, so Twitter exploded. It's just another day. Let's do all of our intro stuff and we can get right into it. We're going to hit the Manticore's Tale tonight, which is another fan favorite. We'll play the Manticore's Lullaby on Sunday by SJ. Again, I have to wait at least a little bit because there's spoilers in every song, so I didn't want to get away from where we are in the story by playing songs ahead of time. But we'll do that Sunday. So, as usual, for legal reasons, this is not, you can't see my wildly gesticulating arm. This is not an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales. This is a play, a one-woman show. You can find music based on this book, including Manticore's Lullaby and Taglio's song at sjtucker.com. You can find copies of these books at your local independent bookseller's web portal. And I do request, if you care what I think, and I think probably if you're joining me after all these weeks of reading, you do care a little bit what I think, please buy it from independent booksellers rather than from the big store, the big A, big red A. You can find me on Twitter most of the time, but right now only retweets at Cat Valenti. You can subscribe to my Patreon at Cat Valenti as well. You can catch up in the archive at Cat Valenti Live on YouTube. And these usually go up between 24 48 hours after I read them. But Instagram has changed the way that they store videos, so it's all up on my Instagram profile immediately. You can ask me questions after the reading. But it's better if you think of them while I'm reading so that there's no dead air while I awkwardly stare into the camera and there's no sound anywhere and we all pretend that we're in the same room feeling awkward together, but actually it's just me feeling awkward. And if you are so moved, you can put a tip in the tip jar. If you want to toss a coin to your witch, there is a tip jar on my Instagram profile, my YouTube profile, and my website at catherinemvalenti.com. You don't have to, but times are super tight. We all just paid our taxes. So if you are moved to give anything, to toss anything to the witch's hat, it would be deeply, deeply appreciated. And thank you so, so much to Richard and Agnes who've tipped me in the last week. You guys are amazing. Absolutely heroes of the people who are me. And anyone who does give me a tip, I will thank you by name on the next stream, unless you tell me you don't want me to. Okay, I'm going to have a little sip and hope that I don't have lipstick on my teeth. And then we're going to jump right into this one. We are moving right along, I got to say. We are chugging through this. We're up to page 125 if you're following along with your own copies. Warm up the voices. What am I drinking? I am drinking vodka and water because we don't have any mixers in the house at the moment. I'm not a big mixers girl anyway. Like my preferred drink at home is generally vodka and soda water. When I go out to a bar, I'll have something a little fancier. If you've read Radiance, you've heard my my rant about ordering simple drinks at bars. And I definitely subscribe to that in real life. But at home, yeah, I couldn't think of anything else. There's no mixers, so it's just vodka and water. I'm in my 40s. Who cares? All right, let's do this thing. The tale of the eunuch and the odalisque continued. You do not understand, Immaculata said. For you, this is a pleasant world, no different than an open pasture speckled with sheep and horses. But we are not sheep, and we are not horses, and we did not ask to be shepherded nor corralled for the use of the biggest bull. Her last words stung like a crop. Had I not done the penance of a hulking bull? I hung my head. I will take you to Zmea's chamber. Immaculata seized my hands, and her hair brushed against my arms. Her red silk rustled against me. Come with me. There are better things in this world than this, I swear it. Why would a eunuch care so to deliver bound women to an intact man? You owe him nothing. Come away with me. I have watched you. You have watched me. Let us not pretend otherwise. She cupped my face in her hand. I know you are Gaselli, yet you have never hurt us, never. I tried to protest that this was no act of chivalry, but she stopped my mouth with a copper-ringed hand, cheap baubles empty of stones and thrown away by other women, which left green bands on her fingers. Before widening my eyes, she turned one of the pronged rings inward and pressed it into her neck so that blood welled bright as her veils and trickled onto her collarbone. I did not understand, but she pressed my face to her neck. I opened my mouth to assure her again that I did not want her flesh, and her blood slipped between my lips. She tasted like tea. Of all the dancing women in their shawls, she alone tasted sweet. I took her gift and her hand. When she walked with me to the great harem door, the bells at her ankles sang, and no one marked our passing from that place. The tale of the 12 coins continued. I took her to Zmea's chamber, and it is true what they say, that Zmea was a great snake beneath her woman's skin. We did not trouble ourselves much about it. I being half gazelle and Immaculata being all tea-bush. Deliverance was as simple as an open window. We went into the wild together, Immaculata and I. Oublyette's eyes were wide. What happened to her? Why is she not with you now? Taglio grinned his feral grin and danced a lazy step or two. The first tale is free. The second must earn its way in the world. We have nothing to give you, I'm afraid, I said sorrowfully. You must see us as we are, poor in all things save blackberries and road dust. That is a tragedy, true, young master, the eunuch said with a sigh. Where are you headed? I asked. Over hill and dale and mountain, river and desert, and possibly those blighted hills and dales again, to Agenab, where we have heard artists of our caliber are welcomed. Thrummed the Manticore's voice. Grotesqui's warm spiced tone seeped into me, and I shivered. Oubliette and I exchanged looks. Perhaps we had not done with cities. We cannot pay you for a song or a scene, but if you would accept company, we would travel with you, I said nervously, overexcited as a groom. Taglio frowned. Much as we might enjoy little ones, they are expensive to maintain. I breathed deeply. We cannot pay for trifles, songs, and bells and flutes, but if you will take us in, that is great enough a thing to pay for. Oubliette gripped my arm. What are you doing? She hissed. But I smiled at her, a smile I hoped promised games and warm afternoons and songs with new friends. And no more dank barracks, no more paper blankets. I tweaked her tail a bit, as I did when she was grumpy. She relaxed, but her grip did not lessen. I squeezed back, and she drew a single day buff from our purse. The Gaselli and the Manticore recoiled, but could not take their eyes from it. I felt the weight of it in my hand, my own flesh. Was this what Rumi meant about the thrill of the rare trade? I felt sick. I would buy an army of children twice your size. The green man breathed. He took it solemnly and closed it away in his belt. I did not let it go easily, but I let it go. Can you sing or juggle or act? Can you balance on a branch? Do you have any interesting deformities? Grotesque tore at the uncomfortable silence and peered at us, a buyer canvassing horses. I can juggle, Oubliette said, blushing in the face of the great lion. I once had a lovely ball. I learned well. And she turned slightly so that her back bark was clear, and flicked her dun tail with a flourish. The red lion's face softened, and Taglio's mouth opened slightly in shock and recognition. The gallant little man sank to his knees before my friend and put his hands to her face. Oh, poor child of Alcon. You should have said so from the first, he whispered. In such a way we joined the pair of them on the road we chose, which led to a lake and a cold grey wind. Though we asked to walk with Taglio, panting to hear more of immaculata, he insisted that Oubliette ride with the great scarlet Magikor and not trouble her little feet. I would not leave her side. I would never leave her, never. Reluctantly, we slunk off toward the jangling blue cart and climbed inside the waiting door, making room for ourselves in the coil of Grotesque's thick, mottled tail. We inched closer to the beast to avoid her green barb. But the tail flesh was warm as a sun-baked brick, and we were soon quite comfortable. The feel of it beneath our backs was soft and firm, but we could feel her pulse, low and thick as a huge drum. She turned her remarkable blue eyes onto us. Shaggy red hair around her shoulders thickened on her neck and chest, curling below her chin so that she really did seem a maned lion, king of the pride, save for her woman's face. She licked at the stiff, wiry fur. You want to hear of the odalisque, yes? The tea-maker's girl. You would rather walk out there, on the hard ground, with the moon slapping your heels with her bony hands, than in here with me. Taglio thinks he can tell stories, but the songs of the Manticore are famed by those who survive them. And I knew her too. Gingerly, Oubliette reached out a hand to stroke Grotesque's brilliant fur. The serpent lion purred and hissed all at once, and her eyes softened. Listen, darlings, infant things, and tell me I cannot sing as well as a gazelle. The Manticore's tale. Sing, oh, sing of the sun-muscled Manticore. Thundering fleet are their scarlet feet, and great are their echoing roars. No hunter more patient than we, no serpent so sour-tailed as we. No snarling leaps lighter, no long teeth brighter than ours, on the scrub-spotted deserts of home. Ha! Let us have none of that. Do not sing of us. We do not want your songs. We will sing, and you will listen. The desert is wide and white and dry as an old bone. We worry it, we gnaw and tear and peel it bald. And we sing when the moon is jumping on the sand like a skinny white mouse. We sing and the salt bush weeps. The oases ripple under our breath, the blue and clear water where the rhinoceros wrangle, where the cheetah purrs and licks her paws, and the upas trees waver green and violet in the scalding breeze. They will tell you the upas is a dead death bower. They will call it the hydra tree of the desert, and warn that if you sleep beneath it for even a night, you may wake, but to no morning man has known. They will say that 300 soldiers, all in bronze and feathers, camped beneath an upas once, to drink from the clear stream that flowed beneath its branches, and that by the time the sun touched their toes, all were dead and cold as dinner. This is ridiculous, a fairy tale. But I suppose it is not entirely untrue, for the upas is our mother, and we are enough of death for anyone. And if soldiers camp under an upas when she is blowing her seed, it is no fault of the hungry kittens that tumble out, if they find their supper plump and laid out on the sand. Look, passers-by, but not too closely. At the radiant upas, the lover of the sun in his golden bedchamber, her red branches thick and strong as a haunch, thorny and pitted, her green needles far too glossy and stiff to grow in that thirsty desert. Look at her fruit, nestled in the shadowy forks of her knotted trunk, how scarlet and purple, how thick and full of juice. Touch one at your peril, for these gleaming berries are not fruit, but eggs. And it is we that grow within them, in the crimson sacs which wax in the blistering scrub light, full of the peculiar upas yolk we drink and drink, which fills our tails with enough poison for a lifetime. Until we rip that silk-thin skin and tumble out head first into the water, or soldiers, whichever seems most convenient. I remember the upas milk. It was sweet, like blackberries and blood. In the fruit sack we know all things, how the sun preened on the face of the oasis pool, how one upas, though neither the tallest nor most beautiful thing in the desert, opened up her branches and grasped the reddening beams for her own. Her wood warmed and the pool rippled. The sun would not have noticed if his mirror had not been marred. He would have been angry and scorched the tree for her theft, had not the first Magikor fruit burst open before him, and if he did not think the little cub with her needle teeth and her whipping tail and her sky-bright eyes was the most lovely of all imaginable things, and immediately set about teaching her to sting and roar and sing and kill, all the things he knew. The upas smiled and told her sisters how to follow her lead. After we fall, it is hard to remember these things, to know they are true. But we do our best to love our parents and turn our prayers to the sky and the sand. It is only unfortunate that we are more or less helpless when the upas blows us free. No more fears than little red kittens or infant snakes, blind and wet and mewling. Our tails do thrash quick and sharp in those first hours, indiscriminate, for we have not quite learned to control it when the oasis, littered with palm nuts and antelope ribs, catches us in its green gold arms. This is when the Wranglers come if they are clever, with their silver tail caps spangling in the desert light. I would like to tell you I was reared in the open flats, the white and worried bone, that I tore open leopards and antelope and rhinoceros, that I remember what that tough gray flesh tasted like, and that horn. I would like to tell you that the sun and I ran together, bounding red-pawed over the salt bush and the pale weeds, that in the warm red rocks I rolled with my legs in the air, scratching and roaring and eating as I pleased. I would like to tell you that the echoes there taught me to sing. I would like to tell you I was happy, and the sun was high in the sky. But the Wranglers came with their little silver cap, something like a thimble with buckles and straps, and armored and polished metals splashed with the last desperate strikes of countless kittens, lashed the thing to my barbed tail. My thrashings were dull thuds and sprays of sand, but nothing more. I howled. It is not only the province of wolves. I howled, and that did startle them, for the voice of the Magikor is terrible and piercing and sweet. Sweetest and most terrible of all possible voices. Like a flute and a trumpet playing together, it is barbed as surely as a tail. I howled and keened, thumping my useless limb against the ground pitifully. They took out the wax stoppers and closed their ears to me, and into an amber cage I went, clapped in an amber collar and gagged in leather to keep me silent. Tell me again how the Gazelli sing. Tell me that no melodies are lovelier than theirs. The heights of the amber city made me dizzy. The platform spiraled up and up those impossible cedars, and on the spindly bridges I nearly fainted away, so far below did the ground sway and wobble. They pulled me up with squeaking pulleys and moving flats drawn with wet ropes. I retched into the muzzle and choked on my own bile. The green branches cut the clouds as I rose and crumbled against the lifting floor. and sobbed against the straps which bit into my face until I tasted my own blood with every lurching inch upward. I hitched and gagged, bewildered, as afraid as any lost beast. But I was close to the sky, so close, and the sun beat my back fondly. The amber cage had an amber lock, and the girl had an amber key. She kept it on the beads that slung around her like chains, dangling right at the base of her throat. We've got an illustration of the lock and key. In those days, any number of creatures were brought from every hovel and height in the land to delight this creature, whose clear, calm eyes took in everything with equal regard and due. She was dutifully amazed at my fur and tail, dutifully frightened at my muffled roar, dutifully patted my head, and dutifully passed on to the next wonder of nature brought up the trees for her pleasure. She took no joy in any one animal over any other, and her voice was genteel and grateful when she thanked the Wranglers for bringing her these miracles and grotesqueries. By the latter she meant me, and thus I was given my name. For some weeks she came, dutifully, to visit her menagerie, escorted by Wranglers and noble nursemaids, and occasionally her father. She played with the pygmy elephant and the wobble-kneed young centaur whose legs were bound in her absence so he would never grow to shame her with excess height. She had a djinn whose smoke had gone out, and a fish in a great glass bowl who owed her yet 2 wishes. Their games were odd and solemn. She sang to them, and sat them to tea with amber cups they could not help but break, and scolded them for their manners. She forced their struggling heads onto her breast, and all exclaimed it a miracle that her gentleness of spirit and purity of heart could charm the most savage of monsters. She did not charm me. After attempting to get me to drink from her dainty cups and sing with her while she did her sewing, she declared with great sadness that the beast she had named in jest was truly a grotesque beyond salvation, and that I should be sent away, for I was surely in my unfathomable heart unhappy there. I knew this meant a slaughterhouse, or simply being shoved off the platforms into the narrow spit of sea. But what maiden knows how the world is skewed to spare any testing of her virtue? When she and her escort had gone, a small, dark shape remained, silhouetted against the doorframe of the wretched zoo. It came into the light, and I saw that it was a girl like the other one, and lost interest. Save that she came and knelt by my cage, and loosing a strand of black beads from her throat, put her own amber key into the lock, and opened the amber door. Poor Groteschi. You see these beads? When amber is burned to make resin, this horrible black stuff is left over, and the golden oil pours dutifully into the catch. No one wants it. It is garbage. I, too, am what is left over after her. What is thrown away when she has passed over it, what remains in the corners when she has swept by. She put her hands to the muzzle's buckles and let it loose. By then I had grown. I was the size of a small horse, but the muzzle had never been changed. My jaw would never close quite right again. She did not mind my teeth. She rubbed my chin and my cheeks, wiping at the hardened blood at the hem of her dress. Her name was Hind. She was a good girl, and I slept in her bed from that night on. Even when I was fully grown, she slept curled between my paws and demanded iron supports for her pitifully delicate bed. Together we snuck into the libraries at night, and she taught me to read from the books kept on the highest shelves, which I could reach for us, stories of lost girls and lost beasts and grotesques like us. She brought me cakes from the kitchens, covered in icing so much thicker and richer than the mashed and rotten meat of her sister Zoo. When she became more beautiful even than her sister, I used to sing at her window to the men who gathered there to play their flutes and harps. They scattered when faced with my superior songs, and I padded back to Hind in her black beads, and I was happy. The sun was high in the sky. Happiness, when you look back on it, seems so brief. But then with her, my whole life seemed to pass by under the flitting cedar shadows, until the day she ran into our room and slammed the door behind her, her chest heaving under those black beads, her face flushed with tears. I ran to her. She buried her head in my mane. Finally, she drew back and sobbed horribly, a long, broken howl. I remember when I howled that way. A pearl fell out of her mouth. The tale of the 12 coins continued. Grotesque's voice held us fast. Out of her misshapen jaw came a strange lilting tone, low, raspy, but sharp and keen as a plucked harp string. Someone had poisoned her, having no business in Emberabad but to vex my friend, because her father did not like her books or her cakes or her pets. What kind of a person fills their larder by punishing other people's petty complaints? Oobleyette and I shifted against her tail, and I glanced over at my short-haired friend under my eyelashes. You're telling the wrong story, I whispered. What about the tea girl? Grotesque stared at us, her eyes bright and amused. What an impatient couple you are. I was getting to it, you know. So spoiled by my friend in green. You like his story better because it has a harem. Young boys always like tales of distressed women in silk. Oubliette elbowed me hard. I like this story. Be quiet, she hissed. The Magikor rolled her eyes. Very well. A performer must always play to her audience. Oubliette dared to creep closer to the red lion, resting gingerly against her ribs. Hind begged me to take her away. She promised that she knew how to use the floating platforms, that we could run from Emberabad to another city where her affliction of pearls might be of some use to us. And so the girl strung with black beads packed her cakes and some few of her precious books and climbed onto my back, proudly astride, as her father told her never, never to do. The Manticore's tale continued. We descended together, through the branches and clouds onto the long road, and she clung to me all the way down, her long fingers gripping my mane so as not to fall while I bounded off the last amber plank. I faithfully kept my tail from curling tightly upward, as the recalcitrant thing is wont to do, so as not to hurt her. We stepped onto the thick grass, and my friend laughed to feel it, solid ground beneath her at last. We went into the world in search of this other city, and it was on the road to that fabled place, which was called Ajanab then as it is now, that we met the oddest couple trundling along the seaside paths. I'm sure there is no need to describe my taglio to you. Was his hair longer in those days? Were his eyes brighter? I cannot tell. He did not wear green then. Immaculata had shredded her red silk, but kept it knotted into her hair as a reminder of her bondage, braided bright against the brow. They were beautiful. Taglio played his pipes, and Immaculata had become a kind of tinker, though her tea bags were never far. They made a meager living through sleight of hand and the odd set of tongs played for a hunk of bread and a chunk of cheese. They told us their tale, and they did not know where they were going, only away from where they had come, and they had been already years on that hungry road. Hind, being fond of pets, asked them to go along with us to that city of spices, which was so far from where we stood that it might as well have sheared off from the map of the world and gone drifting on the underside of the parchment. I'm lonely for company, Hind said, though my red beast and I love each other. I think she would be glad of another beast, and I of another woman. In Ajanab there must be spices for your teas you have not yet dreamt of. In Ajanab there must be meats roasting that you could not begin to name. Come with us and tell us tales, eat our cakes and read our books and become as beloved as you may. When she finished her speech, her hands were full of pearls. The couple stared at her. And so we traveled. With Hind spitting her pearls word by word, we were rarely hungry. Taglio taught her to juggle and pantomime. Immaculata made us tea over countless campfires. They were happy. There are many ways to be happy, and they had theirs. They pulled coins out of each other's ears and made countless cups and shoes vanish, only to reappear to gales of high-pitched laughter, like owls hooting in the wind. I envied them, and so did poor lonesome Hind, who had no more pretty boys at her window and only me to sing to her. Every evening the red-braided girl would take the Caselli behind clusters of trees or reeds and let him taste a single drop of blood from her throat. Her neck was a pattern of tiny scars like a star chart. Hind watched this in silence, standing alone near the fire with her hands clasped tightly together. Whatever she thought of their ritual, she kept it to herself. Slowly, the sea became long, grassy valleys, and in one of these valleys we stumbled into a shanty town of brilliant and varied colors, tents breaking the low morning fog like the masts of ships. It was something like a circus, performers of all kinds rubbing the sleep from their eyes and stretching their legs, strapping on stilts and polishing trumpets, practicing violin scales and barker calls, elongating any number of legs into graceful steps. 100 voices trilled octave to octave, 100 lines of tragedies and comedies bellowed out from 100 obese contraltos. As we descended into the cheerful maelstrom, Hind clung to me, unsure of so many strange folk. Immaculata stroked her hair. A woman nearly collided with us on the path through the tents, driving before her a massive boar which walked on its hind legs, a little yellow cap on its head and yellow ribbons hanging garishly from its bristly neck. The woman was rather short, slender as a cracked whip, dressed in all goatskin, fur hanging gray and coarse from her arms, her waist, all the way to her tiny ankles. Her eyes were a keen, narrow gold, and her hair was blue as drowning. She held a long churchwarden pipe in one hand, its mouthpiece glittering green. "Watch where you wend, folks, or my pigs like to trample you. Takes all his concentration to keep in a straight line," she said, her voice thick and raspy with smoke. "Excuse me," said Immaculata, always polite. And it had long ago been agreed that Hind was not to talk to strangers, as we would not want to be robbed of her by someone who fancied having a girl who dispensed endless jewels from her mouth. "But where are we? What is this place?" The woman drew deeply on her pipe and blew green smoke at her boar. She looked up at the tea-girl's scarlet ribbons, and her eyes narrowed further. "How long have you been away from Varhasund, my little decadent?" Taglios started as if slapped. The goatskin woman laughed and coughed and laughed again. "Don't worry, who would I tell? As for the rest, this isn't any place, silly things. By tomorrow we'll all be gone, each to our own corners of the yawning, grassy world." And we will continue with the pig tamer's tale tomorrow. It goes on for quite a bit, so if I start it, we'll be here all night. So yeah, that's that. That's at least part of the Manticore's tale. I hope that you enjoyed it. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask? There's that awkwardness. Here it comes. Oh, crushing. We're getting into the nature of the two sisters, the Pearl one not being quite so bad as all that. I had completely forgotten about the Pig Tamer's Tales. I don't actually remember what comes next there, or what Varhasund has to do with any of this, but I'm sure we'll all find out together. Is the Tea Girl based on anything or my own invention? She's a little bit based on the story of Momotaro, which is one of my favorite Japanese fairy tales, the story of the Peach Boy. There's a whole kind, for those of you who know about folklore, there's tale types, and there's a whole tale type about the child made out of other things. The parents who can't have a child, and they end up either assembling one or one arrives to them. Momotaro is the pit of a peach. So a giant peach floats down the river, and his father goes to cut it open and hears a baby's voice crying in it, and like carefully opens it, and there's a little boy inside. I love that, and I love Momotaro. I actually use Momotaro in my classes all the time to illustrate differences between Eastern and Western fairy tales. And so it's a little bit based on that. Have I ever frozen my perfect brownies? I haven't. That's a good thought, though. I would like to get back to baking. I was holding on to like my sanity and everything with quarantine. I've kind of let it go, and I've let the baking go, and like not doing this every night. Man, that was helping me a lot more than I really understood, I think. Everything's the whole house is a disaster. My life's a disaster. Everything's a disaster. I've just given up on everything. Have I ever considered writing nonfiction, a book about historical legends and such? I have, actually. There's a couple nonfiction books that kind of have in the back of my head, and my agent does nonfiction. But the main nonfiction book that I have planned, and I'm going to talk to my agent about when I finish a couple of the outstanding projects I have, is I want to do a book of essays about science fiction and parenthood called Transmissions from the Mothership. So we'll see how that goes. And somebody suddenly Jamie said, no question, just a thank you. You're so welcome. How on earth do I charm Penny into curling and purring? The cat likes to listen. It's because I'm a cat. I got a nice cat voice. Actually, that's how I got the nickname Cat. Cats used to follow me around when I lived in Scotland. I would have a little trail of kittens and cats, feral cats behind me. They wouldn't let me pet them or anything, but they would follow me around to listen to me talk, I guess. And that's why people started calling me Cat. I think you can totally freeze those brownies. I don't think it would be a problem. They're so moist, like they're barely hanging together, so they're so moist, so I don't think that freezing would harm them at all. Can you mail order the perfect brownies? No, but the recipe is on my Patreon. I don't know what I'm going to do for Patreon's recipe this month. I don't have, because I kind of stopped making stuff for the last couple of weeks. I don't have anything in the chamber. So if there's something you guys want to know how to make, I like hit me up and maybe I will make that this month. Yeah. Well, let me do my outro stuff, and if you have any more questions, you can just pop them up there in the field. As always, for legal reasons, this has not been an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales. It has been a play, a one-woman show. You can get music based on these books at sjtucker.com. You can buy copies of them at your local independent bookseller, at their web portal these days. If this is the future and everything is fine, hi, nice to know that, future self, then buy it at their physical stores, which I hope have survived. You can find me on Twitter at Cat Valenti. Hopefully I'm allowed to post to Twitter again. You can find me on Patreon for my perfect brownie recipe. There's a perfect cheeseburger recipe up there and perfect beef Penang recipe at the moment. And a lot of other things that are not about food at Cat Valenti as well. You can catch up with the archive at Cat Valenti Live on YouTube. And you can, if you are so moved, you can toss a coin to your witch and throw something into the tip jar, which is on my Instagram profile, my YouTube profile, and my website, which is catherinemvalenti.com. You don't have to, but times are gross and tight and a disaster. So if you are given and can afford to toss anything in there, it is deeply, deeply appreciated, more than you can know, and I will thank you by name on the next stream. Thank you all so much for coming tonight, and I will see you again on Sunday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, where we will be taking up with the pigs on our road to Ajanab. Do I have a favorite Manticore story legend? Actually, the reason the Manticore is in here is that there's very few Manticore stories. Like, usually the Manticore is just a monster that shows up and like devours people. The thing about the voice is true. They're supposed to have these incredibly hypnotic human voices. But I wanted to have like a proper Manticore story where the Manticore was at the center of the story and not just a side character. Because almost every story that involves a Manticore, they're just a random beastie, random encounter. And so I think they're amazing, and I wanted to do something with them. And, you know, I really love the chimerical creatures and sort of thinking about what their anatomy must be like and their culture based on what animals they are made of. So I love Grotesky. She's my girl. She's on the cover. I don't know if you guys can see too well, but oh, you can see my ring light in there. There we go. All the glare is too much, but Grotesky's right there on the cover, being awesome. And yeah, no, I'm Manticore girl all the way. But they really are. They're usually just a threat. And I don't know of a single tale that's from their point of view. But even the ones that aren't from their point of view, they very rarely get much in the way of a spotlight. So I wanted to give that to them. All right, I will see you guys on Sunday night. Stay safe. Wear a mask. Stay home. And I will wink at you then. Bye, guys. Yeah, there's a lot of parented by trees creatures in here. I don't know. Look, man, there's a lot of stories in this. I had to come up with stuff over and over again, but I do like the combo of like, you know, plant and animal things. So I don't think there's any more. There's just the two in the series, but I do Yeah, I am what I am. I like weird stuff. And so do you, or you wouldn't be here. I'll see you guys on Sunday. Good night.